Hey, Story Stream fam. Welcome to the final chapter of The Wake of Ash. If you've made it this far, thank you. Your theories, your support, your attention to every detail have made this one of our most intense stories yet. In part 3, we're diving beneath the waves, not just into the sea, but into memory, into guilt, and into a truth too heavy to float. The ship is no longer a vessel. The ocean is no longer water. And Elias, he's not running anymore. If you're new here, you're stepping in just as it all breaks open. So hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell, because this final part will pull you under. The Wake of Ash, Part 3, The Return. It took me 2 full days to convince myself that I hadn't lost my mind. Not completely, at least. I cleaned the hold, scrubbed the floorboards, threw the mirror overboard, watched it sink without a sound, swallowed greedily by the flat black sea, but it was still with me. Every time I glanced at a reflection, metal, water, glass, I saw it. That thing with my face and black eyes, always smiling, always waiting. It never moved, not until I blinked. Then it was closer. I started sleeping with the lamps lit, not because I was afraid of the dark, though I was, but because the light seemed to delay it, like it hated being seen. Like me, the sea was still, weeks without wind. I was adrift in every sense of the word. My logbook entries grew shorter, more erratic. I'd write a sentence, only to look back an hour later and see something else entirely. Words I didn't remember writing, symbols I couldn't read. The mark on my hand had changed again. It no longer looked like an eye. Now it resembled an open mouth, rimmed with teeth, and it throbbed. One night, the ship lurched. No wind, no wave, just one violent jolt, like the sparrow had struck something below. Something that didn't break. I raced above deck, heart hammering in my chest. The sea around me had changed. It glowed faintly now, a sickly green luminescence, like something ancient was stirring far below. The stars above were gone, not obscured, gone. The sky was blank. The silence had returned. But now it wasn't empty. It was full of breath, full of listening. I shouted, just to hear something, anything. The sound didn't echo. It didn't carry. It was swallowed. That's when I saw it again. The figure from before. Stitchmouth, watching from the water, head just above the surface. Only this time it wasn't alone. Another shape stood beside it. Smaller, paler. It looked exactly like me. Not as I was now, but as I had been the day I left port. Beard trimmed, eyes hollow but sane. A man trying to believe he deserved to live through penance. They stood side by side, unmoving, a mockery of judgment. And then the Stitchmouth figure raised one hand and pointed not at me this time, but at him, at the other me. The pale one stepped forward and began walking across the water toward the ship. I couldn't move. My legs had turned to iron. He reached the hull, climbed the rope ladder. Boots thudded on the deck. And then I was face to face with myself. He looked tired. He looked calm. He looked real. "Who are you?" I managed to croak. He tilted his head. "You know," he said. I shook my head, backing away. "No, you're a trick, a ghost, a punishment." "Maybe," he replied. "Or maybe you call me because you're ready." Ready for what? To confess. He reached out and touched the mark on my hand. The pain was instantaneous, like fire under the skin. I screamed and dropped to my knees. Visions came all at once. The storm, the helm, Kira screaming in the rigging, Jonah clinging to the wheel, Mira falling overboard, and me, standing frozen, not by fear, by choice, because I had seen something in the water, a shape, a promise. If I gave it what it wanted, if I gave it them, I might be spared. I had made a deal I didn't understand, a deal I was still paying for. "You let them die," the other me said softly. "You chose to." I didn't know. "You did. You just didn't care. Not enough." I shook my head. "I'm trying to atone." "No," he said. "You're trying to forget." I looked up, tears in my eyes. "Then what now? What do I do?" He didn't answer. He stepped back and walked off the ship, just like that, gone beneath the surface. I sat there, gasping, trembling. The sea began to churn. Beneath the boat, something massive stirred. I grabbed the wheel instinctively, but it didn't matter. The compass spun wildly. The stars were gone. The sails rippled with a wind I couldn't feel. The sparrow moved on its own, toward the spiral current that had formed around me, a whirlpool but vertical, like the ocean had peeled open, revealing a tunnel of water leading downward, ever downward. I tried to steer away, to fight the pull, but I wasn't the captain anymore. The wheel wouldn't budge. The sails billowed with impossible force. And slowly, inevitably, the ship began to descend into the water without resistance. The sea didn't rise to meet us. It opened. I looked over the edge. There was no pressure, no water rushing on deck. Just black stone stairs, ruins, and fire. Blue, cold fire beneath the sea. The Sparrow was no longer floating. It was descending like an offering, and all I could think was that it wasn't over. This wasn't the end. This was where the truth waited, not in the stars above, but below. The sea had vanished, not the way a tide retreats or a storm breaks. No, this was something else. One moment, the Sparrow rode the black water like it always had, and the next, the ocean parted like curtains drawn back for show. A silent, cavernous void stretched beneath us, wide enough to swallow cities. And at the bottom of it all was light, a pale, flickering glow, like distant lightning frozen in time. It came from the walls, from the architecture. Yes, there was architecture under the sea. The Sparrow drifted downward with no sails, no wind. It simply moved, like it was being carried by an unseen hand. The deeper we went, the more I saw massive spires of black coral, encrusted with bioluminescent moss, archways as tall as cathedral doors, stairs that led nowhere, statues of beings I couldn't name, each carved with impossible precision. Some looked vaguely human. Others were monstrous amalgamations of creature and idea, a face made of eyes, a hand with no wrist, just fingers twisting back into themselves. I stood on the deck, unable to speak. The silence down here was so thick, it pressed against my chest like a second skin. My breath fogged the air, even though it wasn't cold. It wasn't warm either. It was neutral, like the absence of all sensation. When we reached the stone platform, the ship halted, not with a jolt, but like a feather settling on a cushion. A gangplank extended itself. I hadn't touched a thing. I hesitated, but only for a moment. Some part of me knew there would be no going back. Another part, maybe the last rational shred I had left, whispered that I never should have come this far. But I stepped off the ship and onto the stone. The platform was massive, hundreds of yards wide, built from a single sheet of dark basalt etched with glyphs that pulsed faintly. I didn't recognize the language. I didn't have to. The meaning burned into me all the same. Welcome, or maybe return. A long path stretched ahead. Pillars flanked either side, some broken, some pristine. They were covered in barnacles and ancient chains that looked more decorative than functional. I walked. The Sparrow didn't vanish behind me. I checked. It sat there quietly, like a dog waiting for its master to come home. But I knew it was a lie. That ship wasn't mine anymore. It hadn't been since I turned that wheel during the storm. The path led to a gateway, a towering archway formed from bone-white stone, twisted together like strands of DNA. As I approached, the ground shook, just once, a single warning. I paused at the threshold. Inscribed above the arch was a phrase. This time, the words formed in English, though not carved. They flickered, as if written in fire across my vision. You may enter, but not as you were. I stepped through. The temperature dropped instantly. My breath misted. I pulled my coat tighter around my shoulders, though it did nothing. Beyond the gate was a hall that stretched farther than the eye could see. Along either side were mirrors, dozens, hundreds, each one flickering with faint candlelight. But they didn't reflect me. Each mirror showed a different version of myself. One clean-shaven and in dress blues. Another younger, laughing. Another gaunt and furious, locked in a brig. Another dead-eyed, floating in dark water. All of them watched me. All of them judged me. I picked up my pace. Halfway down the hall, I heard it. A heartbeat. Not mine. Not the sea's. It was slow, massive, and alive. It pulsed through the walls. And with each pulse, the mirrors shimmered. Some cracking slightly. Others rippling like liquid. Then a voice. Low. Measured. So deep it rattled my bones. Sailor, you have come. I stopped walking. I didn't mean to. You did. You called us in the storm. You traded their lives for your own. No. I backed away from the center of the hall. I didn't understand. I didn't know what it meant. Understanding was never required. Only choice. Then let me make another one. I said, trembling. Let me give myself instead. Let me pay. There was silence. Then a whisper, not spoken, but etched into the back of my skull. You may. The ground in front of me cracked open. A spiral staircase led downward into flickering flame. Not orange, not red, blue, cold fire, dancing without heat. I looked over my shoulder. The mirrors were gone. So was the path. I was alone, and it was only down. I descended. Each step felt heavier than the last. My skin began to itch, then burn, but I wasn't injured. I was shedding something. Lies, maybe, memories. The lower I went, the clearer it became. I was heading toward a throne. Not gold, not carved from stone. It was a mass of driftwood, bone, and broken compasses, each pointing in different directions. And in the center sat a figure. Not Stitchmouth this time. Not Faceless. It had my face. A third version of me. Eyes empty. Hands bloodied. Marked from wrist to elbow in the same symbol. Repeated over and over. It looked at me, and it smiled. We've been waiting. The figure on the throne didn't blink. It breathed, though, slowly, deeply, like each inhale was a swell of a tide, and each exhale its retreat. I stood on the last step of the spiral descent, unable to look away. My legs were lead. My mind, a compass spinning madly in place. It was me, not just in shape or face. It was me in a state I refused to accept. What I might have become at the weight of my guilt had hollowed me out completely. Eyes devoid of regret, shoulders proud, hands raw from what they'd done, and what they were willing to do again. The throne creaked as he leaned forward. "My name is yours," he said. His voice was mine but layered, as if 1,000 versions of myself spoke in chorus. "I am what you made when you bargained in the storm." "I didn't bargain," I said. My voice cracked, dry from dissent. I panicked. I froze. I failed. He tilted his head. A difference without distinction. One way or another, you let them die. I was scared. "You were selfish." He rose from the throne, slow and deliberate. No sudden movement, no threat. But his presence filled the chamber like rising water. He stood just a few inches taller than me. His face was marked by salt and time, by 1,000 watches under dead skies. He carried no weapon. He didn't need one. "You've walked through the gate," he said. "You've seen your truths." He gestured behind me. I turned, and the spiral staircase was gone. In its place stood a mirror. Tall, oval, framed in rusted iron that pulsed like it had a heartbeat of its own. But this mirror showed no reflection, only the sea, endless, still, beckoning. "You want atonement?" the throne self asked. "It lies through there." "What is it?" He smiled. "It's not death. That would be too easy." I approached the mirror. The surface rippled as I neared, not like glass, but like skin stretched too thin. A scent rolled out, brine, old wood, and something metallic. "I've been punishing myself," I said, half to him, half to the silence. "For what I did, for what I didn't do." "No," he said, "you've been hiding. You let your guilt become identity. You let your shame steer the ship." He walked around me, circling like a shark. "You came out here thinking a year of solitude would scrub your soul clean. But you didn't ask for forgiveness. You didn't face what you'd done. You just floated." I clenched my fists. What else could I do? Go back and look their families in the eye? Let them curse me? Beat me? Yes. His answer was immediate. Simple. Terrible. Because that would be honest. I staggered away from the mirror. "You want me to walk into that thing?" I said, "so I could be judged?" He stopped pacing. "No," he said, "you've already been judged. You want to atone? You walk through knowing you will never be clean. You go without hope of return. Not because you'll be rewarded, but because it's what they deserve." I was shaking now. I didn't realize I'd been crying. "I'm not strong enough." "Then you've learned nothing." The chamber darkened. The blue fire flared, revealing now that the walls were not stone, but bone. Thousands of skulls pressed into one another, mouths open in silent scream. Not decoration. Witnesses. "They're waiting," he said. "Not for your apology. For your deed." I turned to the mirror again. The sea inside it churned now. Not violently, but rhythmically like it was alive. "I don't know what's on the other side." "You don't need to," he said. "You just need to go." I stepped closer. The mirror was no longer just a portal. It was a wound, cut open in the shape of redemption. I reached toward it. "Wait," he said behind me. I turned. He held out a small object, a compass, not broken. Still, its needle pointed directly at the mirror. "This won't guide you where you want to go," he said. "Only where you deserve." I took it. The moment I did, I felt the ship again. Not the sparrow, but the sea itself, alive, aware, watching. I took one last breath and stepped through the mirror. There was no impact, no shattering, no fall, only cold, only silence. And then, voices, faint, familiar. Jonah, Hura, Mira, their laughter, their screams, their last moments. And one voice louder than the rest. Mine, making the deal, promising the storm something that did not belong to me. I opened my eyes. I stood on the deck of the Sparrow. Only now it was half submerged. Ghosts move around me, performing duties without sound. Each one with hollow eyes. Each one someone I had lost. Each one watching. Above me, the sky was gone. Only an eye remained, not in the heavens, but beneath the ship where the sea should have been. It blinked, and I understood this wasn't punishment. This was forever, and I had just arrived. The air was thick with salt and whispers. No sooner had I stepped onto the deck than I realized I was standing in a place that wasn't meant for the living. The Sparrow, half submerged, rocked gently with the waves. Waves that seemed to pulse with the beat of something ancient and alive. I reached for the nearest railing, the cold iron biting into my fingers, and glanced around. Nothing was as it should have been. The familiar wood of the deck, worn from years at sea, was still there, but it was slick, almost oily, as though it had been touched by the hands of the dead. I couldn't explain it. I didn't want to. The sky was gone, replaced with a great, swirling vortex. At the center of it was an eye, an enormous, unblinking, unfeeling eye. It glowed faintly, a pale blue-white, like the moon at its zenith. Yet it held something else, a terrifying awareness. The storms that once raged were now tame, only moving in lazy circles around that eye. The wind had stilled. The ship groaned beneath my feet. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering in my chest, only to stop when I saw them, the crew, or what was left of them. They moved across the deck, silent as shadows, like phantoms trapped in a dream. Jonah was there, his once boisterous laughter replaced by a hollow stare. Kira, standing at the bow, holding a rope with fingers that seemed more skeletal than human. Mira at the wheel, her hands gripping the spokes, though I knew she had died long ago. They were alive, yet they weren't dead, either. They were caught in this in-between, just as I was, just as the ship was. I reached out toward them, but my voice caught in my throat. None of them reacted. It was as though I wasn't there at all. Why? The words slipped out before I could stop it. Why are you all still here? None of them spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the sea and the rhythmic beat of that eye in the sky. But something else stirred within me, a deep primal realization. I wasn't supposed to be here. This was not just the edge of the world. It was the end of it. The sea, the ship, the crew, all of it was a purgatory. A place for the lost, the damned, the ones who had chosen self-preservation over everything else. I had traded lives to save mine, and the universe had taken its toll. A voice cut through the silence, not from any of the dead around me, but from somewhere deeper. It was soft at first, like a whisper carried by the wind, but it grew louder as the ship groaned and shuddered again. You have come far, the voice said, but this is where your choices meet their end. I turned, but no one was there. It was the eye, the vast, unblinking thing above the ship. Its voice was both ancient and young, as though it had always existed, yet it had only now found its voice. The storm, I said, almost to myself, the one I called. It was never meant to give me life. It was a punishment. The voice didn't respond immediately. Instead, the swirling vortex above seemed to stir, like a breath being taken. The water beneath the Sparrow began to churn. I felt the weight of something enormous below the surface. A presence, watching, waiting. You were not meant to survive, the voice said again, its tone shifting, now colder, harsher. But you made your choice, and you walked the path of defiance. Now, you will understand what that cost. I turned back to the crew, staring at their empty, haunted faces. They had been the ones who had trusted me, who had followed me, and I had betrayed them. They had died. Because of me, I had kept my promise to the storm. But at what cost? And now, the storm was here to collect. I stumbled back toward the center of the deck, my hands shaking. The ship lurched beneath me, and I fell to my knees. A sharp, jagged pain shot to my chest, like 1,000 needles piercing my skin. It was as if my very soul was being torn open. The eye above me blinked. I screamed, but there was no sound. The ship's bow rose, and I felt the sea pull at my body, urging me toward the edge. The vortex churned faster, its swirling current threatening to swallow everything whole. I don't deserve this. I gasped, struggling to breathe. I don't. The voice cut through me like a knife. You chose it. The world tilted. The wind, the waves, the very air, everything was drawn into that eye. The force of it tore at my clothes, my skin, my soul. The ship groaned again, louder this time, the sound like an animal in agony. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the ship stopped moving. The sea was still. The eye blinked, and the voice spoke once more. You are not the first to stand here, sailor. You are not the first to choose life over the lives of others, but you may be the last. I gasped for air, but the words burned in my chest, choking me. What does that mean? Soon, the voice said, you will understand. The world went dark. For a long moment, there was nothing, no light, no sound, just cold, bitter emptiness. And then the ship was gone. The sea was gone. The sky, the eye was gone. I was standing in the center of an endless void, the weight of the world pressing down on me. I could still feel the sparrow beneath my feet, but the water was gone. The crew was gone. And then I saw it, a shape, a shadow, drifting toward me through the darkness. Something enormous, with tendrils that reached toward me like the claws of a great beast. And then in the blackness, a voice spoke once more. This is your fate. The storm has come for you. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer on the sparrow. I was somewhere else entirely, a place that shimmered like sunlight on water, yet held none of its warmth. The air was thick with salt and the faintest taste of iron, but the cold beneath my skin was deeper than any ocean chill. I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at a vast sea that stretched beyond the horizon. But this sea was unlike any I had ever sailed. Its surface was smooth as glass, yet flickered with a strange, liquid light that moved like living veins beneath the surface. The sky above was a storm of colors, violet and gold and emerald, swirling in patterns that made me dizzy. I blinked and shook my head, trying to clear the fog that had settled in my mind since passing through that mirror, through that endless void. Behind me, the path I had walked vanished into thin air. There was no going back. A voice called to me, quiet but insistent. I turned to see Kira, standing a few feet away, her expression more solid, more alive than the ghostly forms I'd seen before. Her eyes held something I hadn't seen in this place yet. Hope. Captain, she said softly, you made it through the eye. I did what? I asked, confusion still thick in my throat. You faced the truth, she said. The eye showed you what you had deep inside. It stripped away your lies, your excuses. It forced you to see yourself as you really are. I swallowed hard, thinking about the years I'd spent trying to drown those memories in silence and solitude. And now, I asked, now, Kira said, you have a choice. The storm that took us all still rages. But it's not just a storm of wind and water. It's a storm of souls. It feeds on fear and regret, and it doesn't rest until it's claimed every one of us. Her gaze turned distant, as if peering past the horizon. The sea gave you a second chance, but it's not mercy. It's a test. You must decide if you'll continue running, or finally make peace with what you've done. I clenched my fists, and if I refuse, she looked at me with a steady calm that unsettled me more than any storm. Then you'll drift here forever, a ghost caught between tides, never at rest. I felt the weight of her words settle into my bones. The endless silence, the watching eye below, the hollow faces of my crew, all was not just punishment, but a prison I'd built myself. The sea was patient, but it never forgot. I looked down again at the glassy sea. It rippled gently now as if breathing. What must I do? I asked. Kira smiled faintly. You must sail again. But this time, the voyage is not to escape, but to confront. You'll journey through memories and shadows, reliving moments that shaped you, moments you ran from, each one a test, each one a tide you must ride. I swallowed hard, and if I fail, the sea will take you, as it always does, she said. But if you succeed, you might find peace, or something close to it. I looked up at the swirling sky, the colors shifting faster now, like a tempest rising. And if this is all a trap, I said bitterly, if it's just another way to keep me chained. Kira's eyes darkened. You'll know soon enough. Suddenly, the wind picked up, a cold, biting gale that whipped around us, tugging at my coat and the edges of the cliff. The glassy sea below roared to life, waves rising like specters. You have to choose, she said urgently. Step onto the water. Take the helm again. I hesitated. Fear clawed at my chest. But something deeper, something I thought was dead, stirred. A spark. I stepped forward. My boots touched the water, or what should have been water, and the surface rippled like a pond disturbed by a stone. The sparrow appeared beneath me, solid and real, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. I climbed aboard, feeling the familiar roughness of the wood beneath my hands, the creak of the deck underfoot. The air smelled of salt and old sails and something new. Kira followed, taking her place at my side. The voyage begins, she said. I took the helm. The ship moved. The sea shifted and changed, revealing glimpses of my past, in its depths. Faces I'd loved, faces I'd lost. The storm itself, wild and merciless. Each wave carried a memory, and each memory demanded I face it without turning away. I gripped the wheel tighter, heart pounding. The rising tide was not just outside. It was inside me, and this time I would not run. The sea ahead was flat as a sheet of burnished obsidian, the horizon sharp as a blade's edge. Behind us, the spectral winds had pushed the Sparrow forward for what felt like hours suddenly ceased, as though we crossed a line into something sacred or forbidden. Kira stood beside me at the helm, her eyes scanning the unnatural calm. "This is the heart," she said. "The heart of what?" I asked. She looked at me. "Of the storm, of what remains." Ahead, the waters shimmered and split, an island surfaced beneath the waves, not rising, not erupting, but appearing as if it had always been there, and we were just now allowed to see it. The island was unlike any land I'd ever known. Its shores were littered with shattered hulls, fragmented anchors, and bleached masts. Ships from a dozen eras, wrecked and broken. Not just my Sparrow, not just ships I recognized. All ships, every vessel ever lost at sea. The Sparrow slid toward the shore, her hull scraping along a beach of crushed bone-white coral and rusted chain. I stepped off the deck, boots crunching into the brittle debris. The air was thick here, drenched in memory. I could feel the weight of it pressing on my chest like the moment before confession. Kira walked beside me, silent. As we made our way inland, I saw them. The crew, not just mine, dozens, hundreds, all watching. Some faces drawn in sorrow, others blank, but none angry. That, more than anything, unsettled me. They weren't here for vengeance. They were waiting for something. At the island center was a single obsidian obelisk, half buried in sand, its surface slick with moisture that refused to dry despite the heatless sun overhead. Etched into the stone were names, thousands of them. I ran my fingers along the surface. The salt stung my skin. Then I saw it. My name, Captain Elias Rourke, etched in deep, harsh cuts near the top. My throat closed. "This is it, isn't it?" I said. "The final judgment." Kira nodded once. It always was. A sound like the cracking of ice split the silence. The obelisk trembled, and the seam opened down the middle, revealing a stairway descending into darkness. I looked at Kira. She didn't move to follow. "You must go alone," she said. "We only walk beside you so far." I hesitated, but then placed one foot onto first step. The stone was warm beneath my soles, like the last breath of a dying fire. I descended, down and down, spiraling deeper into what I could only assume was the root of the island, into memory or dream or judgment. The staircase ended in a chamber lit by no flame, but by the glowing imprint of a vast map etched into the walls, one that shifted and moved like a living thing. I saw oceans and continents, storms and wrecks, and at the very center, the storm, not just any storm, my storm. It churned endlessly, suspended in time, a frozen vortex of wind and wave. Beneath it, something glimmered, a mirror. I approached it slowly. The surface showed me, not as I am, but as I was before the wreck, before the cowardice. It showed me at 16, standing proud at my first helm. It showed me smiling, unbroken. But then the image changed. It showed me whispering into the cabin, "Take me instead or take them." And suddenly, I wasn't looking at myself anymore. I was looking at someone else entirely. A boy, no more than 10, hiding behind a dock crate, watching a group of men drown a sailor in the harbor. One of them looked like me, but it wasn't me. It was my father. The boy didn't cry out. He didn't run for help. He just watched, frozen, just like I had been in the storm. That's when it struck me, the pattern. The fear I carried all my life wasn't just guilt. It was inherited, learned, and passed down. But if cowardice could be learned, could courage? I reached out and touched the mirror. It shattered. The chamber collapsed. I fell through light and memory and sound. And then silence. I opened my eyes and gasped, lungs burning. Salt. Sunday. I was lying on a dock. Wooden. Splintered. Familiar. The harbor. Home. I sat up slowly. My clothes were dry. The Sparrow rocked gently at the dock, whole and gleaming like she'd never sunk. The town was quiet. Too quiet. I stood and walked toward the street. Not a soul stirred. The windows were shuttered, doors locked. The flags didn't flutter. The sea didn't move. Then I saw a sign nailed to the post by the pier. Memorial for the lost. Captain Elias Rourke and crew, 1-year anniversary. I blinked. 1 year? The date was today. I turned and saw someone standing at the end of the dock. Kira. She didn't speak, just watched me. Then she pointed to the ship, back to the Sparrow. The world shimmered. Everything, dock, sky, water, rippled like disturbed fabric. And then I heard it, the creak of rope, the groan of wood, a voice in the wind. Did you really think it was over? And that's the end of the Wake of Ash. Or maybe just the beginning of something darker. Elias has passed through judgment, through memory, confession, and consequence. And the sea? It didn't forget. If this finale hit hard or left you with chills, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Our next series is already in the works, and it might go even deeper. Got theories about the eye, the crew, or the voice at the end? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read them all. And if you want bonus content in a shorter form like Reels, please give us a follow on Instagram at StoryStream. Thank you for sailing with us through the storm. We'll see you beyond the next horizon.